Thank you, Ron. I think everyone on the board knows me. Everything staff knows me, and for those of the public, my name is Richard Staub, and I served on this committee in the last go-around and was elected chairman. I've been asked to chair this meeting until a new chairman is elected, which is item 5A of our agenda. At this point in time, do you want me to read this, Mr. Woodbury, the notice to the public, or?
No, there's no need to read it. You've called the meeting to order, and we can proceed to roll call
Okay.
when you're ready.
Then could we get the roll call, please?
Chair Staub,
Here.
Vice Chair Hoffman,
Present.
Member Fagan, Member Hanneman, Member Hart, you're here, right? Member Robinson, Member Wilkie McCullough,
Here.
a quorum's present.
Thank you. I would note for the record that we all know each other. Steve Robinson is a new member this year. Welcome, Steve. Steve and I go back a number of years. I think when I was in law school is when we first met. So that dates us pretty closely. So, but anyway, welcome, Steve. And I think everybody else has been here before. So we're at a public comment. The public's invited at this time to comment on any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. No action may be taken on a matter raised under this agenda item. And I believe their comment is limited to 3 minutes, is it not? Is there any member of the public would like to approach the podium and chat with us? Nope, seeing none. Okay, approval of minutes of May 17, 2022. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes? With the exception of Mr. Robinson, would entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
Have a second? Second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Minutes are approved. Agenda item 5A, possible action regarding the election of a chair and vice chair of this committee. Ms. Hicks?
Thank you. Yes, as a start to our charter review this year, we need to elect a chair and a vice chair from among the members who will serve a term for 2 years.
The appointment of a chair is before us. I would entertain a motion to nominate one of us on this committee to chair.
I nominate Richard Staub to chair and the vice chair to be the vice chair.
Thank you, Ronnie. Is there any other nominations? Hearing none, would entertain a second. Mr. Hanneman's, Ms. Hanneman's nomination.
Second, Wilkie McCullough.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? The matters before us. All those in favor of electing myself as chair and Susan Hoffman as vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I guess we got the job, Susan. All right, thank you, everyone, for your confidence. Okay, we'll go on to item 5B, discussion. This is for discussion only. Review and discussion of the Nevada Open Meeting Law. Mr. Woodbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know everybody up here, but I'll introduce myself for the record. Jason Woodbury, District Attorney here in Carson City. It's my pleasure to be with the committee again this year. This is the only committee that I personally staff because it's the most important committee. If you look at the Carson City Charter as kind of structurally it is the Constitution for Carson City. So every 2 years, this body convenes, and it's sort of like the Constitutional Convention that occurred in Philadelphia in 1787 and initially drafted our Constitution. So it's a very important responsibility, and I know a responsibility that every committee member takes very seriously. So We are obliged and happy to be obliged to provide the committee some training in regard to two areas of the law that apply to all the committee members, and that's the open meeting law and the Nevada Ethics in Government law. So this is the first section of that, the open meeting law. For those of you who were here last year, which is almost all of you, it was a rather extensive presentation, including a PowerPoint, and really covered, for the most part, the open meeting law soup to nuts. Because of the composition of the committee with 6 returning members and Mr. Robinson, who has a lot of familiarity with service on these kinds of boards, you'll be happy to hear I condensed it quite a bit. Although I know last year's presentation was exhilarating. But I'm going to hit the highlights and the portions that really apply to the members most specifically. But I start where I started last year, and that is this. If you can understand the objective of a law and what a law is trying to achieve, then a lot of times the provisions make sense because they're geared to achieving that objective. And there's a lot of nuances to the Nevada open meeting law. It's an entire chapter in Nevada revised statutes, a lot of court decisions on that. But if you can just remember that the purpose of it is to really give life to and recognize the proposition that all political power in this country comes from the people. That's really what we're trying to preserve through the open meeting law. And so there are 3 broad categories of requirements that are set forth in the law, and they concern the principles of notice, that we need to give notice to the people, the source of the political power, of what is being discussed, what's being contemplated. The other broad category is any debate and decisions from this body and all public bodies have to take place in public. They can't be done behind closed doors, the classic analogy of a smoke-filled room. They have to happen in public, where the public and the people can see what's being discussed and why decisions are being made. And then the third broad category the open meeting law protects is the public's ability and right to participate in those decisions. And that's the first public comment period. That was an opportunity for folks who were here to come up and to say to this board, here's what I think about what should or should not be done. And that's one of the requirements of the law. So two of those 3, the members of this body don't need to be concerned with so much. The chair does, and potentially in the chair's absence, the vice chair does. But the first of those is notice. Notice really occurs through the agenda process. We have a public agenda that's posted in public locations and on the internet, where people who are interested can see what this body is up to. But that process really takes place through staff and through the chair, who has decision-making authority over that agenda process. So I'm not going to dwell on that one. And the second one is also the responsibility of the chair, and that's the opportunity to participate. There are required to be 2 public comment periods. So we had our first one. We'll have our next one toward the end of the meeting. In addition, the way this agenda is set up, the public has the opportunity to provide comment during each agenda item if they choose to do so. That's really in the prerogative of the chair to make sure that happens. But the third one is the public part of the open meeting law, and that's where you all have a responsibility to make sure that deliberations and decisions are made in an open and public forum. So that's what I'm going to spend a little time on today, because it's not as obvious as it might seem, some of the requirements. So a public meeting, which is what we're at right now, is defined in law as a gathering of members of a public body at which a quorum is present to deliberate toward a decision or to take action on any matter over which the public body has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power. So a lot of concepts in that, and a few key concepts, the first being public body. What is a public body? This committee is a public body. We can shortcut that. The Chamber of Commerce, not a public body. You can talk about anything you want at any time you want, but when a body like this convenes, matters can only be discussed among a quorum while you're in a public meeting. Second concept, quorum. What is a quorum? It's 4 of you, okay? That's defined in this committee's bylaws, that a quorum is a majority of the membership, 7 members, majority is 4. Present to deliberate is the next key concept. And deliberate means what we all understand it to mean. It means a public discussion about the design to come to some decision. But deliberation can also include a one-way communication. It can involve one member communicating to a quorum what that one member thinks about some kind of subjects that are under the deliberation by this body. So let's take the easy example. You're all at a cocktail party. 4 of you are gathered in an area, and let's say Mr. Robinson, who says that he doesn't like that elections are nonpartisan in Carson City. He thinks they should be partisan. Well, that's a provision in the charter that says all elections in Carson are to be nonpartisan. So he's talking about something that is under the authority of this board. And if he says it in the presence of 3 of you, that's a quorum. He has communicated to a quorum what his position is on something that's under the control of this committee. The easy solution, and the one I would highly recommend all of you abide by, is just refrain from those discussions. If you find yourself gathered with 3 or more members of the committee, let's just stay off the topic of the Carson City Charter as best we can. Now, that only obviously, hopefully it's obvious, but I'll just say it anyway, it only concerns matters that you have control over. If you want to have a great discussion about whether the Wolfpack's going to make the Sweet 16, have at it, because I wish you had control over that, but you don't. So only concerning matters that you have jurisdiction over. But that's the easy scenario, right? The cocktail party. I mean, that's pretty basic, fundamental. You all know that. It gets harder with concepts that we call walking quorums and serial communications. So let's say after this meeting, 2 of you go out to a late lunch. And one of the people at the lunch expresses that opinion. I think Carson City elections should be partisan instead of nonpartisan. And then the one member who heard that, next week you have lunch with 2 other members. And you say, hey, Steve Robinson, I went out to lunch with him. He had this crazy idea that he thinks elections in Carson City should be partisan. We've just communicated Mr. Robinson's position on a matter under the jurisdiction of this body to a quorum, because 3 others now know that position. Even though, the initial communication may have been innocent, he didn't intend for it to go anywhere, but you're just talking, and sometimes you can slip into those things. The easiest way to slip into that walking quorum serial communication trap is emails. Let's say we send out, Deputy City Manager sends out an email to the entire body saying, we're going to be meeting, April 15th. And Mr. Robinson hits that, I hate that button, but it exists on there. We've all done it. Reply all. Reply all. Great. I'm looking forward to that meeting where I can talk to everyone about how Carson City elections should be partisan, okay? Just had that communication because it's gone out to everybody. And those reply alls can, they can happen in sequence. So Mr. Robinson emails a couple of you forward that email, and that can become problematic for us. So again, the simple lesson, and the lesson I hope you all take away from this instance is to be careful of those walking quorums. And again, once you're outside this room, even in emails, best practice is not to have any discussion amongst yourselves concerning business that we're going to be talking about at a public meeting. Obviously, you're accountable to the people of Carson City, and if somebody who's not on this board or some group who's not on this committee approaches you and wants to have a discussion like that, you're more than welcome to do that. Nothing inappropriate about that at all. In fact, it is very appropriate to do that. But you just want to be extra careful when you're communicating with members of this body. Okay. And with that, that's for me, that's abbreviated on this subject. But happy to answer any specific questions now or anytime in the future. If you have something that arises, I'd be happy to discuss them, Mr. Chair.
Discussion, this is also a discussion-only item. Review and discussion of the Nevada Ethics and Government Law. Mr. Woodbury?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So same idea that we had an extensive training a couple of years ago, and I've done what I can do to abbreviate it and just kind of hit the highlights. So going back to that principle, the why of the Nevada Ethics and Government Law, the objective of it, it's based on the fundamental principle that a public office is a public trust and shall be held for the sole benefit of the people. You're not supposed to be here, and I don't expect anybody is here, for any personal benefit. Now, there are three broad categories of influences that the committee should keep an eye on as you serve on this body. The first is a financial interest. If something comes before this body that is either good or bad for your personal financial situation, that's going to be something you want to be on the watch for. Personal relationships, if maybe it doesn't affect you directly, but it affects your spouse or a close family member or something like that, that can create an issue for the ethics and government law. And then other personal benefits, things like gifts and loans that might have a tendency to influence your independent judgment. Those can be an issue. These are the categories of things that can create what we call in the legal world a conflict of interest. That's a conflict between what you are supposed to do as a public officer and what personally you might be inclined to do because it's a personal benefit to you. So first, financial interest. The law calls this a, quote, significant pecuniary interest. So the easy example, we'll start with that, is let's say you want to discuss a charter amendment to have all meetings of the committee at Glen Eagles. And moreover, to make sure Glen Eagles is made whole, you're going to pay them a nice fee of, let's say, $50,000 a meeting to make sure all the meetings are well stocked and you have a good time. Well, if somebody had an ownership interest in Glen Eagles, they might have a significant pecuniary interest in that particular item that would tend to cloud their judgment. So that's an item you shouldn't sit and vote on if you have an interest like that. But again, that's an easy one. And they come in all shapes and sizes, these potential conflicts. So a closer one might be something like, let's say the board wanted, or the committee wanted to consider an item where we want all Carson City vehicles newly purchased to be Teslas. And one member of the committee actually has some stock in Tesla. That gets to be a closer question, because what is the nature of your ownership in Tesla? Is it just one thing in a mutual fund? Is it $1,000 worth of stock? Is it $100,000? Does your wife or spouse own the Tesla dealership that all these vehicles would be purchased from? So it's sort of a sliding scale, but remember, it has to be a significant pecuniary interest. So we've got a situation where if it's in a mutual fund, that might be something you would need to disclose and make sure that it was transparent and out in the public. But if it's not going to affect your judgment on that particular item, you may very well be able to participate in that, even though you do have some financial interest. The second category is a commitment in a private capacity. This is some interest that you don't hold directly, but is held by either your spouse, a member of your household, what I'll call a close family member or in-law, and it's defined in the law as the third degree of consanguinity. If somebody within your third degree of consanguinity has an interest, it's treated the same as if you personally had the interest. It could be triggered by an interest of your employer, or it could be triggered by someone with whom you have a substantial and continuing business relationship. Okay, so just because you personally may not have a conflict, you still want to be on the watch for somebody who's close to you that might have that conflict that is imputed to you. The third is hopefully fairly obvious. I just put it in the broad term of a gift. You don't want to accept a gift from an organization or a person who has some interest in something within your authority. Okay, and a gift can be a gift, an actual gift. It can be things like travel, free trips, things of that nature. Any kind of personal benefit that you're gaining because of your position on the board that could tend to influence your ability to be independent and use that judgment. So that's very high-level stuff. There's a lot of nuances to the ethics in government law in particular. It's very complicated. I mean, myself and members of my office, we live in this stuff, and we do not understand everything about it. I mean, we have to look things up all the time because we don't know the answer off the top of our head, and we certainly don't expect board members, committee members in Carson City to be able to navigate all these things. So that's why I'm here. That's why my office is here, is to help you if such a situation arises. You are welcome to, encouraged to contact us if a situation comes up and you just want us to take that on, to look into it and give you some guidance on what you should do. Because some conflicts, they're conflicts, but they're not so significant that they would affect your independence of judgment. And those are the types where we can say, okay, Member Hanneman, maybe you should disclose this. You should make a statement on the record that identifies, my best friend who's like a sister to me. I know she owns stock in Tesla, but it doesn't have any impact on my ability to be independent here. So disclosure might solve the issue. Some conflicts are significant enough that you actually won't be able to participate. We'll give you that advice that you really should abstain from voting on or participating in the discussion in this matter because you're in pretty deep. And then others don't require any of that. But if it was me sitting in your chair and something arose, the first call I would make is to me or to my office to be sure. And I say that not just because we're committed and we're obligated. It's our duty to make sure that this committee conducts itself in compliance with the Nevada ethics and government law. We say that for your benefit too, because if we blow it, if I tell you, nah, you're fine, you don't need to do anything, you're good on that, and somebody files an ethics complaint against you, you can rely on the fact that you were told by your legal counsel that you were good to go, you were okay, and you will not be able to be fined or charged technically. Failing to comply with your obligations is a violation of the law, and you can be charged with a crime. I've never heard of that happening, but I suppose it's possible. But you have immunity if you are relying on counsel's advice in how you chose to conduct yourself on that. So it's a good practice, not just because it helps get to the right answer, but because it also provides you protection as well. Okay. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's the substance of my presentation. And as I said before, happy to answer any questions now or any questions that might arise in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Woodbury. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Woodbury regarding ethics in government? Hearing none, I will say this. Gifts. Is lunch considered a gift? I mean,
Yeah.
probably is.
It is considered a gift, but that's the first part of the inquiry. If you had lunch with somebody recently, I mean, we don't need to go back, years to say, hey, this guy bought me lunch once. But if it's fairly recently, and that person who bought you lunch has something before the committee, what we'll have a discussion about when we talk about it ahead of time is how much was the lunch? Are we talking, lunch at a relatively inexpensive restaurant? Are we talking French Laundry in San Francisco or some crazy place like that that was thousands of dollars? Because that's going to make a potential difference. Your average run-of-the-mill lunch, if you can honestly say, and I think you'd be able to say, I'm not going to vote in favor of something because somebody who likes the proposition bought me lunch, is probably going to be, I would recommend you disclose that on the record, but you're able to participate in the matter. That said, I do know that there's a particular judge in town who will never let anybody buy him lunch just because he never wants to have to disclose something as kind of trivial as that. I mean, we can sit here together and know, we're not the kind of people who are going to be bought off by a lunch. Hopefully we're not the kind of people who are going to be bought off by anything, but sometimes it's just easier not to have that to disclose in the first place. But that's a personal decision, and it's sort of a case-by-case basis where we look at, what the nature of the gift was as compared to, the item that's actually being considered.
Thank you, Mr. Woodbury. The only reason I asked is because if you're going to have to pay $9 for a Big Mac,
We are getting there, aren't
we
we?
are getting there. I mean, average lunch is $80 anymore.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
It's getting to be significant.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
sure.
So, in my previous experience in public service, I used to live by two rules. If you think you have a conflict, you probably do. And when in doubt, disclose. And that's what I live by, and I think those are reasonable ways to conduct yourself as a public official.
I think that'll keep you out of 99% of the problems people find themselves in.
Thank you. Thank you. All righty. I think we're good on 5C. Going on at 5D, and this is an action item. Discussion and possible action regarding the process and timeline for the 2024 Charter Review Committee identification of charter provisions that the committee wished to evaluate for potential amendment at a future meeting and possible direction of staff. Ms. Hicks.
Thank you, Chairman Staub. Again, thank you all for being part of this committee. As Mr. Woodbury stated, the Carson City Charter acts as the city's constitution, and so we really appreciate your participation in this process with us. The city's current charter dates back from 1969, and the most recent changes to the charter were last legislative session in 2023 through SB 16. In regards to our process for the committee to receive input from the public and possible amendments, proposed amendments to the charter must be heard and debated by the committee, which then advises the Board of Supervisors with regards to the committee's recommendations for amendments to the charter. So we did solicit public input through an online survey, which was done February 1st through the 15th of this year. 4 submissions from the public specifically relating to the charter, to amending the charter, will be reviewed in our next agenda item. Staff does not propose any additional changes to the charter, but the Charter Review Committee members may identify additional proposals for consideration. Our process today, being the first meeting, we cover election of officers, Nevada's open meeting law, and ethics in government, and then we will also discuss those submissions and establish any future meeting dates if necessary. Additional meetings would be scheduled so that we can propose amendments to the Board of Supervisors in a joint meeting, which typically occurs in July. And then, again, the committee may identify any additional proposals if you have any. I'm available if you have any questions on the process.
Thank you, Ms. Hicks. Is there any questions from the committee members regarding Ms. Hicks' comments? Hearing none. I have a question. Is this the time for one of us to say, is there a particular provision of the charter that we need to look at, or is there something, that I would like to maybe be researched? Is this the time to do that? Or is it, we have another agenda item that discusses future items for our review? Is that the time to bring it up?
And you're correct, Mr. Chair. In reading the description of the items on the agenda, I think you could raise that particular question under either item.
Okay, then I'll wait. Thank you. We'll go on to, is there any comments from the committee based upon my comments? Thank you. 5E, possible action. These are action items. Discussion of possible action regarding recommendations to the Board of Supervisors to amend the following sections of the Carson City Charter. Section 2.010 to change the election of supervisors from at-large to being elected by registered voters within the ward that they represent. Number 2, Section 2.180 to revise, clarify, and update language establishing Board of Supervisors' scope of authority over animals and poultry. Number 3, Section 5.100, subsection 2, to change the time the election returns are sealed and kept by the clerk from 6 months to 22 months. And number 4, Section 2.330, to add all department heads need to be Carson City residents. Ms. Hicks?
Thank you. As I stated, our public input solicitation was from February 1st through the 15th. While 8 residents submitted responses, only 4 of those submissions were specifically related to amending the charter, and those are the submissions that are before you today. Bebsi Strasburg and David Partee suggested an amendment to change subsection 2.010 of the Carson City Charter, which requires that all supervisors be elected by registered voters of Carson City at large, to require that supervisors be elected by registered voters within the boundaries of the wards that they represent. Lisa Schutte requested review of section 2.810 to revise, clarify, and update the language establishing the Board of Supervisors' scope of authority over animals and poultry, such as tax, pound, and pound keeper. Additionally, the listed enforcement measure of capturing and disposal of all dogs on which a tax is not paid is not considered best practice, nor is it cost-effective. Outdated terminology and practical application concerns apply to both subsections 1 and 2. Paula Peters requested an amendment to section 5.100 subsection 2 to change the time the election returns are sealed and kept by the clerk from 6 months to 22 months pursuant to NRS 293C.387 subsection 6A, which states the city clerk shall seal the election records, maintain them in a vault for at least 22 months. And Bebsi Strasburg also requested an amendment to section 2.330 to add that all department heads need to be Carson City residents. We would be glad to answer any questions you have regarding these submissions or any others.
Any members of the committee have any questions on, let's start off with number 1 on the election of supervisors?
I have a question. I thought I remembered that that was made at large by a vote of the people. Did that not, am I misremembering that?
I don't have specifics. The concept of voting by ward instead of at large was the subject of a ballot measure. I couldn't tell you the year, but within the last few elections, that was submitted as a question to the voters, and the vote was in favor of keeping at large as the method.
Any other members have any questions? Mr. Woodbury, I believe you are correct. I think it was I want to say 2022 election, and the voters did vote. That matter, this exact matter was on the ballot, and the voters voted that it should remain the same. All the supervisors would be elected at large. So this matter was also before this committee in our last go-around. And I think as chair then, we all decided that we were not going to basically make any recommendations regarding this type of an amendment based upon the then very recent vote of the people. And I certainly don't feel comfortable recommending to the Board of Supervisors a change in this. If the board wants to put it back on the ballot, they can do that. And I think until the voters have an opportunity to weigh in again on the issue, I don't know that this committee is going to touch it. Any members have any comments based upon my comments? Ms. Hanneman?
I have been told, get this thing right. I have been told that it's been proposed and up to the voters more than once, so at least 3 times in the past, so. And if it hasn't gone 3 strikes, you're out, so.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you. One thing I've been a bit dilatory about, are there any members of the public have any comments, on 5B, which is the open meeting law comments, 5C, the Nevada Ethics and Government comments, or Ms. Hicks' presentation on what this committee is all about? Seeing none, thank you. Are there any members of the public, do they have any comments on the recommendation for this committee to consider a change in section 2.010 regarding how supervisors are elected?
Yes, I do.
Could you come forward and introduce yourself?
John Jackson. I think I'm in favor of making the change because I think it makes the supervisors more accountable to the voters of the board.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Any other comments? Okay. Without any further comments from the committee or from the public, on section 2.80, is there, Ms. Hicks, do you want to comment on that or go over? Do you want us to have, if we have any questions?
Just if you have any questions.
Does any member of the board have any questions regarding a possible amendment to section 2.80 regarding changing or updating language regarding the Board of Supervisors' scope of authority over animals and poultry? And let me throw out this San Rafael Park incident recently where a dog was shot and killed. And I was just informed of someone walking around Sonoma Park with their dog armed, which became a concern of the residents at the park and around the park. So I just throw that out to complicate the issue a bit.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, are we going to vote on these one at a time? I see 4 motions down here.
Mr. Woodbury, do we have to vote on them, on each one of these? Are you asking us to do that at this point in time?
It's the chair's discretion how you choose to conduct this item.
Okay.
You certainly could vote on them one at a time, or you could have the entire discussion and then vote on them one at a time, or you could vote on them as a chunk at the end.
Well, thank you, Vice Chair Hoffman, for bringing that out. Why don't we go ahead and vote on them while we're talking about them? I would ask all those in favor of requesting it, excuse me,
I move to not recommend to the Board of Supervisors an amendment to Section 2.010 of the Carson City Charter to require that members of the Board of Supervisors be elected by the registered voters within the boundaries of the ward they represent.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Matters before us. All those in favor of Vice Chair Hoffman's motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Matter carries unanimously. Section 2.80, we already explained this. Does any member have any comments regarding this revision?
I have one. Just who would be rewriting it, and then would it come back to us before it goes to the Board of Supervisors?
Jason Woodbury, Carson City DA for the record. What we did last time, and typically what we do, is if there is an appetite to entertain the proposal, the conceptual proposal, the committee directs me to prepare proposed language for your review and consideration and discussion at a future meeting.
Mr. Chairman, Joe, isn't this a zoning question? Aren't there zoning laws about where you can, what kind of animals you can have, farm animals or pets on your property?
Jason Woodbury for the record. There are. There's provisions in the Carson City Municipal Code that address what types of animals you can have in specific locations and how many animals. There are those provisions.
And that's what we're talking about here.
I did not interpret the submission in that particular way. There is a section, the identified section, that does address the power of the Board of Supervisors over animals and poultry. The person making the submission felt that some of the language that was utilized was outdated and maybe not consistent with the current direction that Carson City takes in regard to that power, and asked for that to be that language to be updated.
And Ronnie Hanneman, for the record, I agree with Lisa Schuette's analysis. This is very antiquated language. We don't call it a pound anymore. And we don't have pound keepers. And also, if you have not, from what I'm reading, from what I'm interpreting, that if you do not license your dog, that it can be captured and disposed if the tax or the license fee has not been submitted. So I think this is very, early 1900s, late 1800s language, and it really should be brought up to date.
Mr. Chair, I agree with Ms. Hanneman. As the proud owner of a shelter dog, I, for a long time, really had to check myself when I said we got him at the pound, because that sounds like he was in prison. Anyway, and it is a shelter, and I believe that they're a no-kill shelter. So this word disposal is also, it's just archaic and outdated, and I think that we should update it to get rid of the word pound. And then, that old phrase, it's going to ruin the old phrase people use, he couldn't be elected dog catcher, because we don't have dog catchers anymore. So, but that's okay. I agree it should be updated.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Any other questions? Mr. Robinson?
Investigation needs to be made.
Are you putting the first one and the second one together? Is that what you're doing? I think we already voted on the first one. This is a separate item.
Any other comments from the committee? Well, the only question I have is sometimes, poultry is treated different than animals in several residences, jurisdictions. So if we haven't addressed clarifying and updating the language, I think we should probably take on the task to do that. So unless there's any other comments, are there any comments from the public regarding revising the animal poultry language in the charter? Seeing none, the matters before us, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move. Although I did make the last motion, but whatever. I would move that we would refer this back to staff to rewrite that language and bring it back to the committee.
A motion, do I have a second?
I have it, I'll second it.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Matters before us, all those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. Going on to section 5(100), subsection 2, regarding the change in the time and election returns are sealed and kept by the clerk from 6 months to 22 months. Any discussion from the committee? Ms. Hall, go ahead.
I'd be interested to know what our clerk thinks about that, since he'll be the one storing them.
In fact, we are getting ready to destroy June 2022 voting records on April 15th, the 22-month legal law that requires me to do that. So that's what I have to do right now today.
And if it's an NRS, you should really comply with the NRS.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, if I could provide some context.
Please do.
So the charter provision, which was drafted in 1969, does require the 6 months. Nevada law, the statute NRS 293.391 was amended in 1989 to provide for 22 months. So what Mr. Hohen has to do now is comply with the statute, because it's a longer time, and that's that's obviously what he does. But that there's an inconsistency between the charter and what the statute requires.
Any questions from the committee regarding Mr. Woodbury's comments? Hearing none, is there any member of the public who would like to address change in the time election returns are sealed from 6 months to 22 months? Hearing none, the matters before us, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion, Ronnie Hanneman, I make a motion that the records be maintained according to NRS 293C.387, parenthesis 6, parenthesis A, which states that these city clerk shall seal the election returns, maintain them in a vault for at least 22 months.
Wilkie McCulloch for the second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the matter before us, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the matter passes. And lastly, section 2.330, adding that all department heads need to be Carson City residents. Any comments or questions from the committee on this proposal?
Yes, I have a comment, Ronnie Hanneman, and that is you would lose half your staff. So I would say that right now, over 50 some odd % of the employees within the Carson City government are from elsewhere. And most of the staff the department heads are from elsewhere. So I don't think you want a mass exodus of people who already know what they are doing. So I would say to table it, to get rid of this or not consider it.
Any other comments?
Wilkie McCulloch, we found that with the school district too. You can't make your principals be Carson City residents. It also limits the people that you can have and their education, their experience to have that best person in that position. Plus, if you're going to do something like that, are you going to give them a housing voucher or something? Because some people live in other places because it's cheaper than Carson City.
Any other comments from the members? Ms.
Of course,
Hoffman?
I have a comment. Also, in our current housing crisis, I don't think it's a good time to be telling people where they have to live when they might not be able to find a place to live here. And, and if they had to live in a more expensive place, I think we would be in competition with private industry in order to hire the best people for our city. So I don't think it's a good idea.
And I would add, just because of their residency doesn't mean they're not good department heads doing their job. Is there any comments based upon the comments that you've heard? Any member of the public have any comments regarding requiring all department heads be Carson City residents? Hearing none, the matters before us, I'll entertain a motion.
Wilkie McCulloch, I've moved that we do not recommend to the Board of Supervisors an amendment to the current, to have all the department heads need to be Carson City residents in section 2.330.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. The matters before us, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the matters before us, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Matter carries. So, is this the time I bring up my question? Or do you want me to wait till 5F, which we're on right now?
If you could wait till 5F.
Okay, then we'll
You
go forward.
Officially close that matter and
Okay.
proceed to 5F.
We'll close 5E, we'll go on to 5F. This is another action item, discussion possible action regarding future agenda items and meeting dates and possible direction to staff on same. Ms. Hicks?
Thank you. Any proposed changes to the city charter will need to be provided in a legislative bill draft request, which will be due in August or September. If there are items for further discussion, then we propose the following meeting dates. We had polled everybody to see if these dates would be good, so we've listed currently April 15th at 2 o'clock and May 13th at 2 o'clock, but we can also hear any items for further discussion that the committee may wish to add.
Thank you. Any comments from the committee members on the meeting dates? Ms. Hoffman?
Well, I'm not going to be available on April 15th to come to the meeting. So if we only have to have one, I would like it to be in May because I'd like to be here. But if I can't be here, that's okay.
We did have an alternative date of April 23rd at 2 o'clock, but I don't know if that changes it for other individuals, so I just throw that out there.
I would prefer the April 23rd because otherwise I'd have to cancel a long existing meeting for the 2 o'clock on April 15th. And I'd rather not do that, so.
Can't do 23rd.
I think she prefers the 23rd. Okay, no? Any other available dates?
May 13th, then acceptable to everyone? May 13th?
Fine with me.
Okay.
Everybody okay with that? Okay. Now I'll bring up my comments. Is there a provision in the city charter, I can't recall one, that periodically or every so many years that we do a evaluation of Carson City government, the organizational structure of Carson City government? In other words, the committees that we have, whether they're really viable. In other words, looking at whether we can streamline what we do in a more efficient manner.
You mean boards and commissions as well?
No, not so much. Well, yeah, I think it should include boards and commissions. I think there's probably a few commissions out there we could, I think everyone needs to sit back and evaluate how we do government, and I think we need to look at it periodically to do that type of evaluation. At least staff do that evaluation and bring forward a recommendation to bring our government, I guess, to current standards of operation.
Jason Woodbury for the record. I don't believe I know of any provision in the charter that sets that out as you've stated it. There is a requirement for an annual internal audit, and the charter does address the internal auditor. that's obviously more of a financial oversight kind of situation as opposed to necessarily the structural review and analysis that what I'm hearing you talk about. So I think my answer to your original question is there such a provision? I don't believe there is.
Well, I knew this was going to draw a question from Member Robinson, having been in senior state government, because I believe there is a provision at that level that does require the Nevada government to take a look at itself periodically that certain departments, committees have to justify their existence. See?
Yeah, there's both a legislative provision for that for agencies, but I've also experienced a couple governors who have done that. And it works out well. It's been people within government and people without. Takes a look at how things are run. And after 10, 15, 20 years, structures might need to be changed and updated. In my experience, anyway, it's been a worthy effort.
So, thank you, Mr. Robinson. So is that something that this committee has the jurisdiction to look at and make a recommendation on?
Yes.
Can we ask, I mean, obviously the committee will have to vote on it. Can we ask the staff to take a look at potentially the language in the NRS that requires the state and see whether we can adopt a policy or a provision in the charter that requires periodic organizational evaluation?
Yes, we'll look into that and we'll bring something back that is modeled after the ideas referenced by Member Robinson.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the committee regarding the provision I've asked for? Ms. Hoffman?
It would be. I need to I'll take a holistic look at the charter and see where such a provision might fit. It might fit within an existing section and just be an addition to that, or it might replace a section. I'll have to look at that to get that specific.
Any other committee members have any comments on my request?
I'm just curious, do you see some overlapping that needs to be rectified, or?
No, Ms. Hanneman, I don't see that, but I'm not that close to it, and I think that any government bureaucratic entity should take a look at itself periodically and see if it's doing the best job it can do in the most efficient manner it can, and eliminate things that are just a waste of time. And time does change our service responsibilities. So, any questions based upon my comments? Any member of the public wish to come forward and comment on my proposal regarding the evaluation of Carson City government? Hearing none, the matters before us. I'll pass the gavel to Vice Chair Hoffman, and I would make a motion that staff prepare appropriate language regarding a periodic evaluation of the organizational structure, efficiency, and management of Carson City government, including boards and commissions thereof.
That's a motion for Mr. Staub. Do we have a second? Second. For Ms. Hanneman. All those in favor? Any comment from the public? Nope. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Quick. Member McCullough?
Wilkie McCulloch. So we had in that number 3 with the election one where it was an NRS thing that we didn't have in the charter. Is this charter reviewed after every legislative session to see if there are NRS things that need to be put in?
Well, seeing as how NRS was amended in 1989 and we still have the inconsistency, I'd have to answer no. We do the best we can, but no, there's no, well, we do the best we can, but we do miss things like that.
Thank you, members. Thank you, staff. We've come to a point in meeting, item 6, to public comment again. Again, the public is invited at this time to comment on any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. No action may be taken on a matter raised under this item of the agenda. Is there any member of the public that would like to approach the committee with any comments that they may have that is not related to action items on the agenda today? Hearing none, there's no public comment. I believe we are at the end of the agenda. Is that correct? Okay, and it's 2:30, so we did pretty good. Didn't you have this scheduled till 4 o'clock?
That's why we like you as chair.
I was gonna say, I don't know what I'm gonna do till 4 o'clock.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Ms. Hanneman. May I have a second? Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned.